welcome to Bryan College Online. Today we're looking at the Sermon on the Mount. And what we'll look at, this is the longest continued recorded teaching of Jesus in the New Testament, at least the public teaching of Jesus. It's before Matthew's call. When you look at how Matthew presents his own call, it's after this sermon. So raises the question, how does Matthew have it? And the best answer is it was the sermon where he was converted. He was there, he listened to it, he hung on every word. This is a very important sermon for us to see. We're going to look at this thing, blessed are the poor in spirit, and exactly what that means and why it's such good news. We're going to look at this statement, inheriting the land by lot, and what the Old Testament background to that might be. And then look at the higher standards of the sermon, but then the question, how do you get it? So let's dive in. Matthew says, seeing the crowds, he, that is Jesus, went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. Now, this passage is important because Matthew is helping us see that Jesus is a new Moses. He's going up to the top of the mountain. He's going to expound the law. And so we're kind of thinking in contrast of, Mount Sinai versus this mountain where Jesus is. And a lot of scholars think this is the actual place, the exact place where this happened. Jesus starts off and says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. He gives 8 Beatitudes. This is the first one, and in many ways it's one of the most amazing ones, because when we look at this word poor, blessed are the poor in spirit, this is an incredible word. There are lots of different words in the New Testament for poverty. This word, and how it was used in the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, it means helpless people, needy people, poor, those who are wretched, those who are without property. One very prominent lexicon gives this: one who crouches or cringes, a beggar man, or a beggar woman. So when the text tells us, blessed are the poor in spirit, we would be justified in translating, blessed are you when you don't have 2 nickels to rub together spiritually. Blessed are the utterly bankrupt, the spiritually bankrupt. So why did Matthew find this such good news? Because he recognized that he was in that situation, and yet the first words out of Jesus' mouth was, those people are the people who will ultimately be blessed. That recognition, hey, I can't do it on my own. I'm not inherently good. I can't do this. Jesus says when people start thinking that way, they're blessed. They're the truly spiritually blessed. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. And if you were looking at this and you ask the question, how does it relate to other stuff in the Bible, you might think, well, it doesn't really relate. If we were hearing this in the original language, we might hear it a little differently, because in the original language it's kleronomeo tain gain, to inherit the land by lot. And you might recall in the Old Testament, if I photocopied the thing, there are hundreds of times where that kleronomeo tain gain appears. And it's always in this phrase to take possession of the land, to take possession of the land by lot. And remember that the person who implemented that, Moses, couldn't get the people into the land, but Joshua came and got the people into the land. And you may or may not know that the word Joshua and the word Jesus are the exact same word in Greek. So here you have Moses, the lawgiver. He can give you the law, but he can't give you the ability to want the law or to fulfill the law. And so Moses can't get you into the promised land. And this really cool guy named Jesus, Joshua, he brings the people into the land in the Old Testament. And so Jesus here on a mountain is saying, blessed are the meek, for they will kleron obtain gain. They will inherit the land by lot. And it's not the, physical land. It was the land ultimately that God promised Abraham, which was the restored Garden of Eden. The meek are going to get that. The spiritually bankrupt are going to get that. But they're the ones who are connected with Jesus. Jesus says, don't think I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. It isn't that I'm going to lead people into the promised land, into restored Eden, and somehow it's going to be this debauchery where people just give themselves over to sin. No, don't think that. I didn't come to abolish the law or the prophets. I came to fulfill it. In other words, the new covenant, writing the true law, not the ceremonial law, but the true law, conformity to God's will, where you love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and you love other people exactly the way you love yourself. That's what Jesus came to implement, and that's what he was successful in implementing. Whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments, so if you hear a preacher saying, well, the moral law doesn't apply to us anymore, you don't really have to do that, you don't have to worry about sanctification. That's simply not true. It's not what Jesus taught. It's not what the New Testament teaches. Jesus says here, whoever relaxes one of these commandments, teach other to do the same, will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever does them and teaches them will be called great. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of scribes and Pharisees, kind of an outward show righteousness, you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven. It has to be a heartfelt inner, it has to be a heart change. That's why the new covenant is so great, because the new covenant promises that heart change. Look at what Jesus said. So he's going through the second half of the Ten Commandments. He starts with Commandment 6, which in the Old Testament, you will not murder. Don't murder anyone. And Jesus said, okay, you've heard it was said, do not murder. And whoever murders is liable to the judgment. Okay, so that's kind of how the scribes and Pharisees said that's what this means. Jesus said, but I tell you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother, liable to the council. And whoever says you fool will be liable to hell fire. In other words, you shall not murder in Jesus' exposition means any devaluing of someone else who's made in the image of God. That it isn't just the overt act of unlawfully taking someone's life, it's any devaluing. And when you start thinking about that, Jesus is saying if you devalue the life of any person, the unborn, the poor, the oppressed, anything like that, if you devalue their lives, then you've broken this command. And so Jesus on top of this mountain is saying the law is more perfect, it's more spiritual. It calls people to a higher standard, and don't think somehow that I'm saying that we're just going to throw that out the window. No, when you come spiritually bankrupt and you realize you can't, you're coming to the mediator of a new covenant, to the guarantor of a new covenant, who is promising to write God's laws and his ways on our hearts. In fact, to give us new hearts. We look at the second command. Jesus appears just to be going through them. You will not commit adultery. And this is what Jesus says. You've heard it said, you will not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out, throw it away. How serious should be? More serious than you could ever realize. It's better that you lose one of your members than your whole body be thrown into hell. People who are adulterers, that's not what people in heaven are going to look like. They're going to be changed. They're going to be transformed. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off, throw it away. For it's better you lose one of your members than your whole body go into hell. How should you understand this command? Much more seriously than you ever imagined. And then Jesus even adds to it. It's also said, whoever divorces his wife, let her give her certificate of divorce. But I say to you, everyone who divorces his wife except on the ground of sexual immorality makes her commit adultery. So Jesus is saying, the Old Testament, if you hated your wife, you could send her away. And Jesus is saying, but you know that when you do that, you're making her commit adultery. You're making her break this command, and that counts. This law is requiring a purity beyond anything you could imagine. And Jesus is saying, don't think I came to destroy that. Don't think that I came to say, hey, it's just continue living the way you want to live. No, the promise is of the new covenant. Jesus, who can die for our sins, but at the same time, who can promise that ultimately we will be totally transformed before God. We will be just men and women having been made perfect. That's what the New Testament says. And Jesus, when he goes through all the law, he says, therefore, you must be perfect. How perfect? Same way your Father in heaven is perfect. And about this point in the sermon, I imagine Matthew started thinking, I am so excluded from the things of God because my life doesn't measure up to the revealed will of God. And Jesus knew that. Jesus knew that, and that's why at the end of his ministry he can say, I'm the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Matthew, you hear God's law, you see what conformity to God's will looks like. Can you do that on your own? No, absolutely not. Can't even begin to do it. And Jesus said, look, I know that. Apart from me, you can't do it. In me, in my transforming power, look, I've lived, Jesus is saying, I've lived the perfect life. I've never sinned once in thought, word, or deed. I've loved my neighbor as myself. I've given all for my neighbor. I've never lusted. I've never devalued another person. I fulfill the law. And because I'm the guarantor of the new covenant, I will guarantee to the Father that when anyone stands in heaven They will have that imputed righteousness of the fact Jesus is saying, I've lived a perfect life, but also they'll be transformed. When we see him, we will be like him, for we will see him as he is. That's 1 John 3, this promise at death of total transformation, becoming untemptable by evil, becoming fully loving of God and loving of all other people. Jesus knew, apart from me, you can do nothing. That's why he starts off the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are those who are spiritually bankrupt, who recognize that they can't do this, because then they're ready for the gospel, which is Jesus lived the perfect life. He died for all the sins of his people, past, present, and future, and he guarantees their total transformation in heaven. Jesus said to him, so this is a man who believed he could fulfill the Ten Commandments, who, in fact, who said he had fulfilled the Ten Commandments. He said to him, if you want to be perfect, if you want to, perfectly fulfill God's law, go sell all that you possess and give to the poor, and you'll have treasure in heaven. Come follow me. Now, it's clear that Jesus allowed many people who came to him to keep their wealth. And Priscilla and Aquila helped support Paul's ministry by tent making. They were wealthy enough to have a church that met inside their house. There are a lot of people, Erastus, who helped fund the Epistle to the Romans. He was the director of public works in Corinth, one of the richest men in antiquity. So it's clear that Jesus isn't saying, I want you to go sell everybody. But he's saying to this man, if you think you fulfill the law, give it all away. And of course, the man couldn't do that. And Jesus was showing he hadn't fulfilled the law. He hadn't loved his neighbor as himself. Of course, Jesus did that. Who, though being rich for our sake, became poor. He gave everything away. And when we are in Jesus, his life is counted as our life, but also we're transformed at death into that exact same image, where we do love every single other person exactly the way we love ourselves. Hebrews 10:1 says, for since the law was but a shadow of the good things to come instead of the true forms of these realities, it can never, by the same sacrifices it continually offered, make perfect. There's our word again. If you want to, live with God, you've got to be perfect. And outward sacrifices can't do that. Outward show, outward obedience can't do that. You need something else. And so that's why Hebrews says that Jesus, by a single offering, has perfected, this is a perfect past action, lasting consequence, has perfected into the forever, those who are being made holy. We live in the now and not yet. We have this Jesus statements made about us, but the full experience of that reality is not yet. But this is saying that it's not requiring future sacrifices. By one offering, he has perfected into the forever those who are being made holy from their sins. Wonderful promise. And then our wonderful verse in 12, you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, to heavenly Jerusalem, to innumerable angels in festal gathering, and to the assembly of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, to God, the judge of all, and to the spirits of righteous people, having been made perfect. That's what it says in the original. The people in heaven are having been made perfect, not having made themselves perfect, having been made perfect by someone else, having been made perfect by Jesus. You've come to Jesus, the mediator of the new covenant. So Matthew says, enter by the narrow gate. The narrow gate is Jesus. There are a lot of people who want to do it Cain's way, not offering the sacrifice that God directed, but trying to be good on their own. You see these billboards on buses all across America. I don't need God to be good, and those very cities have high trafficking, sexual trafficking victims, and they're saying, hey, I don't need God to be good, but they're not good. We aren't good. None of us are good apart from the narrow way of Jesus. Jesus said, I'm the way, I'm the truth, I'm the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. In the Sermon on the Mount, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father in heaven. It's not saying you perfectly obey and then you get to go in. No, Jesus is the only one who did that. But you do have this sanctification process where you begin to take baby steps. And then when we see Jesus, Jesus fully fulfills the work. And we are made perfect. We're made completely conformed to the will of God. Not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, but the one who does. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? That it's like they were even claiming to be church leaders. Did we not cast out demons in your name? They're claiming supernatural power. Did we not do mighty works, many mighty works in your name? And Jesus will say, depart from me. I never knew you, you workers of lawlessness. So someone who says, oh, I'm a believer, but just continually lives in nothing but sin and are comfortable with that, who aren't plagued in conscience at all, someone who's just comfortable in that lawlessness, this text would say, hey, be careful, because you could be part of that group that Jesus says to depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. But remember where the sermon started. Blessed are the spiritually bankrupt, those who realize, hey, I'm not okay on my own. I'm not able to do this on my own. I need Jesus. I need Jesus as the super Moses, as the real Joshua, as the mediator and guarantor of the new covenant, because he can get me in. Well, I hope that this presentation finds you doing well, and I'll look forward to talking to you next time.